Morning. It is 10:04 a.m. on Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024. This is the inaugural meeting of the Sandpoint Urban Forestry Commission and is now called to order at Council Chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I'm Eric Bush, Sandpoint's urban forester and staff liaison for the commission. Let's go ahead and do a roll call. Paige Belfry.
Here.
Preston Andrews. Here. Chase Youngdahl.
Here.
Jeff Gregory.
Here.
Mose Dunkel. Here. Did I miss anyone?
That's your entire commission.
Okay. I had making sure I read all the names. Kyle Schreiber is the commission's council liaison. Kyle is a city council member. Kyle is also present, as well as city legal counsel Zach Jones to my left here, board clerk Samantha Branscombe, and city clerk Melissa Ward. I would like to announce really quick that the goal is to keep our meetings to no longer than an hour and a half. So we're trying to, we've got a lot of stuff to get through today, but we'll try and get through it as quickly as possible so we can, kind of talk through a couple items towards the end. Please, just go around real quick and kind of introduce yourselves. Tell everyone your background, where you're from, what you've been working on, that sort of thing. I'll start. I'm Eric. I've been with the city for 2 years. I'm a landscape architect, and my duties here are split between capital projects, infrastructure development, that sort of stuff, and obviously the city forestry duties. So I split my time between both. With respect to forestry so far, I've kind of been I've been in the forestry role for about 7 or 8 months, and I'm just kind of getting my feet under me, responding to tree requests, kind of urgent needs more so than long range planning. And I'm really glad that all of you here are here and a part of this commission, and we can start working on some of the long range planning and what the future of our tree canopy is going to look like and all those other exciting things. So Zach, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm Zach Jones. I'm a Sandpoint native. I work with Lake City Law. We are contract counsel for this city, and I've been working directly with the city for almost 2 years now. Time flies. I'm happy. You can reach out to me directly if you have any legal questions, and I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of a spiel on the legal side of things here in a little bit.
My name's Paige Belfry. I am an ISA certified arborist. That means for me specifically, I'm out in the trees doing the work every single day. I really love it. I enjoy teaching people about trees and how trees and people can interact in positive and meaningful ways. I'm also tree risk assessment qualified through the International Society for Arboriculture. So that means that I'm trained to look at a tree and assess how risky, what kind of risk does it pose, and how likely is that tree to fail. So I'm kind of a boots on the ground person. I can look at trees and give you a lot of information and help out in those ways. And I'm also really, really interested in the policy part of things, and looking at how we're going to make the urban forest the most accessible to everybody in this community and the healthiest.
I'm Jeff Gregory, and I work for Vista Utilities as a quality control inspector for the vegetation management program. I'm also an ISA certified arborist and a tree risk assessment qualification through ISA. I've been in the utility vegetation management industry for about 12 years, and so this is kind of new to me, but looking forward to working with everyone, and sure, I like to view every opportunity as a learning experience, and excited to learn from you. So, thank you.
I'm Mose Dunkel. I'm a Sandpoint native. I've been a logging contractor for quite a while, and I own a small tree service company. We've done a few jobs for the city over the years, and through the process of getting permission to work on some trees in certain areas, for private owners that have work that they want done in the right of way, and so kind of understand that process, or at least what it was previously. I'm a timberland owner in the county. I served on the Sandpoint, Parks and Rec Commission for 5 years, and until that ended quite a while ago now. And I'm currently on planning and zoning on there for a while, so, and we've heard, like Mayor said, with, comp plan, tree stuff came up at the very end, when we were ready to approve, some heritage tree topics came up, which, I think we dedicated at least one full meeting to just about entirely to the tree, discussion. And it did bring up, it brought up the need for this commission, in my opinion. So I think that's where maybe this kind of got started. It was interesting because throughout the whole comp plan, we didn't really spend a lot of time on trees, and being a property owner in town, there's trees in the right of way in front of my house that were planted from a grant about 8 or 9 years ago, and doing well. So projects like that in the future, I think that's. But in the planning and zoning comp plan discussions, heritage trees came up, and I don't think we ever really got to a definition or any kind of stance direction that the city was gonna hold with. And so I'm kind of looking forward to that as far as a topic in this commission, because I think it'll be interesting and contentious, maybe. And from my perspective, I feel like I have a lot to add, and I think it'll be a good time. So I'm looking forward to it.
And my name's Chase Youngdahl. My day job is as the noxious weeds director for Bonner County. I grew up right here in Bonner County, lived in Sandpoint for a majority of that, graduated from Sandpoint High. Degrees in forestry and natural resources. And when I saw this commission activated, I viewed that as one of interest to me and a good opportunity to give back to the community in a volunteer capacity and lend my voice and ears to the staff and council and mayor on directions for the urban forest. At the time I submitted the application for this commission, I did go through the Sandpoint's urban forest master plan in a cursory manner. It's a 125-page document, so I do look forward to delving into that in more thorough fashion if you're coming up in the future. But to really, I guess, distill down and summarize my thoughts on this is really going to need to be balancing competing interests. You look at the practical end with hazard tree analysis and public spaces, parks, and sight lines on street signs, rights of way, certainly infrastructure interference, whether it be ground level on sidewalks or overhead with transmission lines, and then while also upholding and respecting Sandpoint's legacy trees. Yeah, trying to do the best that we can to balance the needs and wishes of the community, as well as upholding public safety and obligations in that regard. And it's good to have Councilor Schreiber as here as liaison. I've long before you were elected as the council, you seem like you've been fully vested in all of Sandpoint's matters. And that dedication I certainly appreciate. So looking forward to being a part of this body.
I'm Kyle Schreiber, just finishing up my first term or my first year in city council, and I don't really have any background in trees or arboriculture, so I'm looking forward to learning from all of you. I do feel passionately about how trees can benefit our city, whether it be stormwater or air quality, water quality, just quality of life and property values. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you all come up with.
Samantha Branscombe. I'm your board clerk. I work for the city. I work for Public Works as their admin assistant. And I'm Melissa Ward, the city clerk, and I'm just here to help get this first meeting kicked off.
Last, I'm Preston Andrews. I'm not an arborist. I did work for a while in landscaping for many years after my military service. I lived in the Northwest for about 45 years now, half of that time in Idaho, half in Eastern Washington in the Palouse. I worked at Washington State University for 30 of those years. I'm a horticulturist by training, and I taught and did research. I have a science background at WSU. Focus was on tree fruits, so different kind of trees, but very important culturally. And I just want to be able to learn and lend my expertise to the benefits of.
Well, thank you all. I'm really excited you're all here. We've got a team, and I think we can all put our heads together and make some large improvements on Sandpoint's forest and, near term and long term, the urgencies of certain things we have going on throughout town, we can certainly plan and figure out a path forward for those, and also kind of the long-term vision of what we want our, urban forest or tree canopy to look like, feel like, act like, all of those types of things. So I'm really excited you guys are here. Moving on, we have no old business since this is our first agenda and our first meeting. We will move on to new business and item number 3, orientation and training. I'll begin by yielding the floor to Zach, who will provide an overview of Idaho's open meetings, public records, and ethics and government laws.
Okay. The first thing I want to do is just point to you this handbook out to you. Everybody has one in front of them. Melissa did a really good job preparing it. It basically outlines what the commissions are doing here. It's about 6 pages and it's pretty big font, so I suggest you read it top to bottom. It's full of useful information. 2 of the pieces of information that I want to point out directly that are in here are related to the open meetings laws and Public Records Act. I'll start with open meetings laws. You are a board for the city of Sandpoint, so you are subject to open meeting laws, which means that if there are more than a quorum, or if there is a quorum of you, which is 3, then you can't just meet to discuss official business. Now, this goes with meeting in a coffee shop. This also goes with email change. So anytime you meet with a quorum, so 3 or more of you, you have to follow open meeting laws, which means you have to have the agenda posted, you have to have notice of the meeting posted, otherwise you're violating the meetings. And there are repercussions that can be sort of a domino effect if that is violated. So we just request that, for example, if someone sends the whole board a correspondence, don't hit reply all. If you want to reply, you can reply directly to that person. But if you reply all, then it's an open meeting technically. And so we're just asking to be conscious of that. And then with Public Records, I guess one other thing is, and I'll move into public records, is that the handbook suggests that you get a separate email that is specific for this commission. And I highly recommend that you do that. And the reason is public records. So any business that you have with the city is public correspondence with a single other commissioner or a single city councilor or myself, although attorney-client privileges is not going to go public records, but it's still city business and it's still technically a public record. And so it's really important that you don't have your personal email address or your personal phone, text messages, having written communications, because if there's a public records request or a subpoena in the event of a lawsuit, someone will have to comb through your personal information to gather that, and you just don't want to deal with that, frankly. And so it's much better to just have a separate email address where you do all of your city business on that email address. And that's really kind of what I plan on touching on. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. Just reach out to me separately too. Thank you.
Next, I'll yield the floor to Melissa, who will walk us through a quick review of the Citizen Advisory Board handbook.
Thank you, Eric. And I'm not going to go through the entire thing like Zach mentioned. It's a pretty short little handbook. So you can read it at your leisure. And please let us know if you have any questions. There is contact information on here for the general city clerk email inbox and also our general phone number. If you have questions about anything, you're welcome to reach out to Samantha, or you can just reach out to these general city clerk numbers. There's a couple of us who man those that email inbox and that number, so there's usually some answer. You'll see at the very beginning the purpose of citizens advisory boards. Each has its own list of duties and responsibilities that are in city code. But the general purpose of all of our citizen advisory boards is basically the same, also to advise staff and city council and the mayor. Board members and appointments, board members are appointed by the mayor, confirmed by council, as you know. Goals, city council liaison, Councilor Schreiber is here. His role is to assist in promoting communication between city council and the board, and the mayor. And he will participate in discussions, answer questions, all sorts of things. He will not vote, he's not an official member of the commission. Eric as the staff liaison, very similar. He will be here for your meetings and lead a lot of your meetings and discussions, and assist the chair in coming up with the agenda and posting that in the packet each month. But he is not a voting member. And then as Samantha introduced herself, she will be your board clerk, and she'll be here to assist with communication, agendas, minutes, etc. Our meetings will always be held here in this room at this table for the most part. Once in a great while, there'll be a conflict. We'll make sure we get on the calendar so that we don't have that happen. But for the most part, we will be meeting in this room because it is very accessible to the public. Your agenda and packet will be posted once a month, and when Samantha gets that posted, she will also email you, let you know that it's out there, so that you don't have to go hunting for it wondering. And Zach kind of went over all the public records and open meeting law issues. There's some information here about rules and order of voting. The city prescribes to Robert's Rules of Order as our meeting procedures, meeting protocol, and so for the most part, these boards, we don't get into a lot of complicated motions and things like that usually. So it doesn't usually come up. But there are just some things here to consider about discussion, making sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak, that there is just one or two people monopolizing the conversation, that everyone has that opportunity. The chair and vice chair, they're voting members, so they vote with everyone else. Issues that come up. And the mayor kind of touched on this, the fact that the board can act only as a body, not as individuals. So if you get contacted somehow by media, anyone else who is looking for information about board business, just refer them back to the city, back to your board liaison, your staff liaison, which is Eric. That same goes for social media. I don't know if anybody posts on Facebook or anything like that, but again, it's when you're speaking about board business, you'll want to speak as an individual on something separate from board business and not speaking for the group. Minutes are kept by the clerk, and we have all of those available. They will be posted online. All of these meetings are recorded, and city has a YouTube channel. All of our public meetings are on that YouTube channel recorded, so you can go and watch those at any time. Communication between the board and the mayor and city council. Everything, if you have questions or suggestions or anything that comes up, if there's a recommendation that's made by the board, that will go forward to council as a recommendation from the board as a whole. Sometimes the chair or vice chair or representative of the commission will go and speak. Sometimes it's going to be your staff liaison, Eric. But if you have any questions, you need to communicate with, for whatever reason, just always go through your staff liaison for that. And Eric will make sure that that information gets shared out. Say you have some information for fellow board members, just go through Eric for that. Talked about like public and media inquiries, budget and purchasing. If it comes up later on, that you want to purchase something on behalf of the board to use at, say, an event that's coming up, for whatever reason, Arbor Day, for instance, something like that. just make sure that you're clearing that through Eric, because we don't want an unapproved purchase to be made that you then can't get reimbursed for if it wasn't in the budget or it isn't something that was expected. So just make sure you clear any purchases. Code of ethics and civility, board members acting on behalf of the city are bound by the state of Idaho ethics rules and laws under Title 74, which is the same place you'll find public records and open meeting law.
Can I jump in on that?
Absolutely.
I forgot to mention the ethical side of this. So if you guys have a conflict of interest, or if you have any personal financial interests in any decision-making process, or if you have a family member, and the terms are pretty, like the consanguinity within the second degree, I think is what the statute says. So first cousins. If you have a family member, immediate family member, then you should let us know. And you may have to recuse yourself. Also business interests. And so Avista is a really good one. If Avista has a business interest, which is certainly likely or possible that it would occur, you would have to likely recuse yourself from the voting process. If you have any individual questions, those are questions that I can field. So let Eric know that you might have a question, or you can reach out to me directly. And I can answer those questions and let you know whether I think you should be involved in the decision-making process. And that is really important because it's actually even misdemeanor criminal, but still criminal to involve yourself in the decision-making process when you have a business or financial interest in the decision.
Thank you, Zach. And then it just goes on to, we also have city rules here. We adopted our rules of civility and decorum at public meetings, which is in city code. We rarely have to call on that. Thank goodness we have board members and citizens alike. So you'll see that portion in there. And then just a quick note about liability insurance, that as a board member, you are insured against third-party liability during the course of your appointment. And then just closes out saying, thank you to everybody willing to volunteer your time and effort and your expertise to share with the community. And if you ever have any questions, again, in the handbook, you're welcome to reach out to that general email inbox or phone number.
Okay, I'd like to now go over the commission's duties and responsibilities as provided in city code, and give some insight into my vision for this commission, including the guidance included in the city's urban forestry master. Give me 1 second to share my screen. Oh, you've got that up, Melissa.
I did bring that up. Was that the same thing you're going to bring up?
Yeah,
How about
yeah, you've already got it. We're all set there.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, it's also on the back side of your handout that you received the handbook. Duties and responsibilities list.
So we don't need to go through all of these, but the first line of this paragraph I find pretty important. The commission shall advise and assist the mayor and city council and work in coordination with the city forester and or designated staff liaison to develop, coordinate, and promote the maintenance, enhancement, and long-term viability of Sandpoint's urban forest. Below that, we have a number of additional bullet points that are additional duties and or kind of responsibilities of this commission. And I'm not going to read through all of those, but we have this available and we can provide this to each member if they would like to review. I would encourage that. There's some pretty good and interesting stuff in here. And then Melissa, can I share my screen? I've got some additional things I'd like to show as well. Okay, this is just a document I put together quickly in the last couple days that kind of expands upon the duties and services of
Just use your Zoom bar down there at the bottom right.
Is that a little better? Okay, so this is the first thing I read out of our ordinance update. But there's additional items that I kind of put together and I kind of just categorized them under some various different headings. So code, budget, master plans, and other documents. What I have in italics in each of these is kind of what I see as our highest priorities. And all of these are subject to change and, you know, additions, deletions, your all's comments, thoughts, all of those sorts of things. But this is just kind of where I wanted to get started. So updating Sandpoint's arboriculture manual, it was originally adopted in 2003. It's pretty out of date. It's still got some useful information in it, but we need to begin working on an update and aligning that with kind of current ISA standards, tree care standards, horticulture, all of those things. Assist in developing future year forestry budget requests. We have a couple different budget lines in city budget that's council approved. What I would like to do within the next 6-8 months is kind of have an idea of what we want to accomplish and what our main needs are, and then kind of figure out what sort of budget we might need to do that, which we can then present to city council when they're reviewing budgets, which begins typically July of any given year, which has been adopted in excuse me, late September. The city runs on our fiscal year ends September 30th. The new one begins October 1st. So we're already working on fiscal year 2025 budget that it does not start at the beginning of the year, like January 1st. Review and update the outstanding trees of Sandpoint. This is a older document that we have that was put together a number of years ago. That this is kind of the front page, and then it has a map and characteristics, addresses of various trees throughout town that are, you know, they've been here a long time. They have cultural significance or significance to Sandpoint in particular, things like that. And then it has, you know, little blurbs and rundowns on each of the specific trees. This was originally developed a number of years ago. I do not recall what year off the top of my head. But it's a really cool document, and a lot of folks come into City Hall looking for a copy of it. We have a few hundred left, but we're kind of running low. And updating this and kind of modernizing it, I think would be a really cool thing to do. And like I said, city residents, business owners, a lot of folks are really excited about this, and I think they use it as, you know, kind of a walking tour. They go around and look at all of the outstanding trees, and we can highlight that. And I know we have a number that were not included on this list that probably should be. So I'm pretty excited about that. Review the urban forestry code. That's chapter 15 of our code. Throughout the next maybe 6 months to a year, I'll be working on updates to that code. I'll be doing a lot of the kind of heavy lifting with the actual code and ordinances. But I would like this commission to review all of that and in certain context, help me draft things that are, you know, based on your expertise and things that you have intimate knowledge of. And we have some deficiencies in our code with respect to development and lots of other things that I would like to kind of close some of those and, you know, modernize that code. So review the urban forestry master plan. Our urban forestry master plan is pretty new. It was established or adopted by city council, I believe in 2021 or 2022. It's a great document. There's some things that are definitely missing from it and some things we could potentially tweak. But for now, I'd like to just kind of have everybody review that, get up to speed, and then in future meetings, we can kind of talk about, you know, what, if any, changes we might need to make. Heritage trees, Mo's kind of brought this up in his introduction, and that's a kind of a hot topic in Sandpoint right now. I would like to, you know, identify and define an actual definition of what heritage trees in Sandpoint are, why they're valuable. And I see somehow combining this with the outstanding trees of Sandpoint, and perhaps that, you know, ultimately becomes kind of one document and that, you know, has a kind of future-proof type setup in it where we can add or remove things as needed or as appropriate. And then kind of generally just, you know, I want everybody to be thinking about what do we want our urban forest to look like in the future. We know what it looks like now. We know what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are, where it's deficient. But what do we want 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now? As we all know, we've got, climatic challenges coming up. We've got invasive species. We've got all these things that are potentially harmful to our forest and tree canopy. So I'd like to kind of have a path forward, looking long-term as opposed to just in the immediate future. Moving into forest health, these are kind of more generalized items. Increasing species diversity throughout town. For example, about 20% of our trees in town right now are maples of various varieties. Some of them are really nice. Some of them are species that I wish weren't planted a number of years ago, but they are. And a lot of them are really large. So how do we, kind of maintain those? And as we're planting new trees or replacing trees that have died, whatever, look at that with respect to diversity and a lot of the other goals I have below. Increasing resilience to climatic changes. We all kind of have an idea of what that means. Increase ecosystem services and quantify ecosystem services, not just of shade and oxygen production and those types of things, but also with respect to stormwater and all of those other items that trees can help and provide. We have a lot of trees in the public right of way, city parks, and private property throughout town that need a lot of maintenance. A lot of trees were planted and they haven't been touched. They've never been pruned. No hazards have ever been removed. So thinking about a lot of those items. And then risk management mitigation, we have a couple track arborists here, so I'm sure we'll all get up to speed on that, but we have a lot of need throughout town on that. And I'd like to be able to, kind of simply quantify some of that so we kind of have an idea. And this will help with respect to, future budget requests that I mentioned earlier on. We have, just kind of making up a number here, we have approximately $200,000 of deferred maintenance and hazard trees or hazard parts of trees that we need to take care of. It would be nice if we could over time kind of combine all of that so we know where we stand and we know, kind of what we need to do. That'll help us with budget requests, grant requests, all of those sorts of things in the future. Identify and respond to invasive species, insects, fungal, etc. Just last month, on November 6th, myself and Erica Eason from Idaho Department of Lands presented to City Council on the spongy moth. Idaho Department of Lands through the USDA has a robust trapping program throughout the state on all sorts of different species, invasive and non-invasive species. They found one sample of a spongy moth in Sandpoint this summer, in August or September. Thankfully, it was just one, and we hope that it's a one-off. But next spring, we're going to be implementing a large-scale monitoring system. We'll have about 150 traps throughout town to make sure we don't have additional spongy moths. If we do, respond accordingly. For right now, it's certainly not a 5-alarm fire. We're hoping it doesn't become one, but making sure we're staying on top of those. Other things that we've got coming in, like emerald ash borer, is not in Idaho yet. It's in Washington, it's in Vancouver, BC. It's going to be here eventually. So figuring out and how we're going to respond to a bunch of those items. Moving on, public outreach. One of the things I've noticed as so far in my kind of time and duties as the city forester are a lot of folks, especially, private property owners, whether they own a house or a business or what have you, really want to do the best thing for trees. They just don't know what the best thing is. They want to prune a tree, but they don't know how to prune a tree. They want to plant a tree, but they plant it 6 inches too deep. Those sorts of things. So I'd like, one of my hopes for this commission is that we can kind of develop an educational program or awareness campaign on tree care, planting, maintenance, burning, removals, all those sort of things. The good thing is ISA, International Society of Arboriculture, has a pretty robust level of handouts, pamphlets, how-tos type stuff. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's more so kind of combining all of that, and perhaps like in future Arbor Day events, having, you know, a tree maintenance clinic, a tree pruning clinic, how to plant a tree, those sorts of things are kind of what I'm thinking about. Seek grant funding opportunities. I get a lot of emails from, you know, various organizations that have grants out there. I certainly don't get all of them, and I suspect a few of you might be on the right emails to get some of those. If you get them, bring them to this commission and let's talk about them and see if it's something we should be looking to apply for. And then kind of some more kind of general things with respect to educational awareness and programming are, you know, letting folks know why right-of-way trees are important, why we need to maintain them, why you can't just cut a tree down in your front yard because it drops leaves or something like that. And then why we allow some trees and not others. I'm talking about species and I'm talking about the type of tree. For example, we don't allow fruit trees to be planted in the public right-of-way. In a vacuum, I love fruit trees in the public right of way because you can walk down the street and grab some cherries and go on your way. But sometimes they're not cleaned up. If they're a nut bearing tree, they can create tripping hazards on the sidewalk, those sorts of things. So again, that's educational, you know, awareness and kind of information that part of that campaign. Moving on, sorry, I'm trying not to talk all your ears off, but there was a handful of items I wanted to get through. We were awarded an IRA grant. We just got the formal paperwork completed last week, and we have been officially awarded. That was for $100,000. This is from Idaho Department of Lands via the USDA. Idaho Department of Lands disperses the funding throughout the state. We applied for this earlier this year. We're accepted. We requested $100,000 and we were awarded our full request, which is pretty exciting. So with that, we'll be doing about half of that money will go to updating our tree inventory. This is the Tree Plotter or PG Cloud. If you've been on that, if you haven't, let me know and I'll send you a link to it. It's pretty cool. I use it daily when we get, you know, tree permit requests and the like, and it's a really great resource. Other things we'll be doing with the grant funds are tree planting in the public right of way and or city parks, tree maintenance, and then tree removal, hazard removals, that sort of stuff. A little bit more about me, my duties. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll be doing code updates in the next year, and I'll be bringing those and we'll be discussing them at these meetings where appropriate. I'd like everyone to kind of be involved, especially based on your specific expertise to make sure we're getting this code and ordinance right. I'm a member of the Idaho Lands Resource Coordinating Council. That's a committee that Idaho Department of Lands maintains. Basically, the committee makes, or council, excuse me, makes recommendations to the state land board on forest health and how the state land board manages state endowment lands primarily. And that we're working on. I was just in Boise 2 weeks ago for their quarterly meeting. We're working on updates to the forest action plan. And that basically, every state has a forest action plan, and that allows them to apply for and receive federal funding for all sorts of things such as wildfire mitigation, invasive species, plantings, harvesting, all of that stuff. My membership on that council doesn't really have a whole lot of overlap with what we're doing here. But there's a lot of things that you know, that I may learn or that we may learn as a group here that I could bring there or that I can bring from there to here. And it's a great team. They've got, you know, wetland ecologists, biologists, fisheries folks, foresters, all sorts of, you know, expertise and knowledge. So I'm excited to be a part of that group, and I'll provide updates where appropriate. I also review development plans for compliance with city code. So much like Mo's membership on the Planning and Zoning Commission, when we get a development application, whether it's for a subdivision or for an infill lot throughout town, I review those for compliance with our city code. That is, are you planting the correct number of trees in the public right of way? Are they the correct species? Once they've been planted, I go do an inspection, make sure they were planted, etc. I also inspect and review tree permit requests. We have a really simple tree permit. It's free. And currently it's not tied to like our building permit. It likely will be in the future. But basically, if you want to prune a tree, plant a tree, remove a tree throughout town, we have a permit. You contact me. I come out and do a site inspection, review the permit. If it's appropriate, I'll approve it. If not, I'll work with the landowner to either figure out what the deal is, what they're trying to accomplish, and what we kind of work through from there. Additionally, I'm kind of managing the funding and expenditure of the IRA grant that I mentioned earlier. And I'm always looking for additional grant funding opportunities. So like I said, if you guys see them, please forward them to me or bring them to these meetings, and we'll review and decide if that's something we want to put an application together. Beyond that, I'll be done rambling here for a few minutes. We have a couple action items, beginning with the election of a board chair and vice chair. Do we have any nominations, or anyone who would like to volunteer to be nominated for either of these positions?
Staff, Madam Clerk, I have a nomination to make. I'd like to nominate Mo Dunkel for the board chair. So he's no stranger to city commissions, having served on the Parks and Rec Commission previously, and currently on the P and Z Commission, I believe in the capacity of vice chair.
Accept that unless somebody else is dying to have it. See.
We take a vote.
So we have a motion from Chase. We'll need a second to that motion for that nomination. Second. Preston? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Selected as chair of your commission.
And next, would anybody like to volunteer or nominate anyone as vice chair?
I'll nominate Preston. If you'd like it.
Thank you.
Second? Make a motion and then second?
I think we've got a motion from Mo.
Yeah, move base for vice chair.
Check. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Motion passes. Jeff has been nominated as vice chair. Or, excuse me, Chase. Apologies.
You got your name.
Our final item under new business is selection of a regular monthly meeting day and time. Staff has looked at the chamber's calendar, and the fourth Thursday of each month is available pretty much at any time of the day. And that time also works well for my schedule. We can discuss, if anyone would like to propose a time on those Thursdays or a different day. We can talk about that.
I would prefer it was in the afternoon. Just because of work schedule stuff, but not late to interfere with other stuff around 4 or 5 o'clock, so 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock works for me.
That sounds fine.
For Thursday at 3 p.m.
We gotta move for that one too. Okay, I move that commission meetings be on the fourth Thursday at 3 p.m. Council chambers monthly.
I'll second that.
Take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, Thursday at 3 p.m.
January 23rd.
Okay, final item is a opportunity for general announcements or comments. If anyone would like to for me to pull back up the Word document I had when I was running through the list of bullet points and discuss, add, delete, remove, whatever, I'm happy to do that. Or if you have updates or additional information you'd like to provide, please do so.
I'd just like to say the master plan, I'm guilty of. I went through it years ago. It's very brief, like Chase had mentioned, probably more brief than what he went through it. There is a lot of information in there and, it's on my list of stuff to do to go through it because there's a city watershed that's included in this that is a huge resource for the community for many, many reasons. And I'm hoping that part of the city's infrastructure we can at least discuss some of the future plans for that or what the current state is in or just anything in those regards because my company did purchase a timber sale in the city watershed almost a year ago exactly from today. And we completed the project earlier this summer. And I was unaware that the city owned thousands of acres in the watershed, which is it's really an amazing piece of property or pieces of property. And part of the reason that I was somewhat amazed by it was it's such a massive resource for water quality for the city drinking water and for, I believe, other activities that are not being taken advantage of, which I know could be contentious because of the water quality issues. But in my opinion, from working on the site, there is some level of neglect the years that I think the city's missing out on as far as is taking care of the property as being a landowner of that amount of acreage, which it's over 4,000 acres. There is responsibility to keep up with it. And currently I feel like it's probably at a level that's just barely almost adequate. And I'd like to be a part of discussion to review what the current plan is and, you know, if there's any way to, I don't want to say capitalize, but in those terms of ways that community could use it more. And also be able to maybe use the resources there to fund other projects that I think would be amazing for the city and for the watershed itself, because there is a lot of natural resource there that is in need of attention as far as timber harvest, and a lot of that is, you know, stagnant stands that are in need of some attention. There's also a pretty fair amount of road systems that carry or do not carry water properly off the watershed into the creek. And I know firsthand that there's a big need for that too. So hopefully that's within some of our discussions. I'm not sure if that's part of the plan, if we're just staying in the direct city limits, but if
So
that's in there, then
I can provide a little info on that. In the urban forestry code, section 2-11-4, it was one of the sections I was reading earlier. The boundaries of Sandpoint's urban forest are the same as Sandpoint's taxing district as defined by the Idaho State Tax Commission. That does not include our watershed properties. And that was that was input into this ordinance specifically because I see the watershed as one, not an urban forest, it's a traditional forest. But primarily because I see that as kind of another role entirely. You know, what we have and our tasks with the urban forest are wildly different than our management and maintenance needs of our watershed properties and the, you know, kind of watershed management. With that said, we obviously, everyone in this room has knowledge that could help management of our watershed properties and, you know, kind of future timber sales and the like. That could, I think, be changed. That would require a code update, and I'm certainly no expert on you know, the tax commission and tax boundaries and the like. Zach may be able to provide a little bit of insight here, but that could be something we could revise to wrap in if this commission so chose. But as of right now, that watershed property and boundary is excluded here.
My insight is at this point, it's complicated.
Now, there's an entirely different master plan just dedicated to the watershed.
There is.
But I mean, I could see how this commission could at least be of use on the periphery, being that that's such a unique resource for a municipality to have that kind of property, you know, under their stewardship.
It absolutely is. And much like Mose said when he was kind of talking about that, a lot of folks don't know that Sandpoint owns property. And, you know, we have property in that area kind of below Schweitzer. And a lot of folks don't know that we have a water treatment plant just directly off, you know, Schweitzer Mountain Road. So that's something we can keep discussing and, you know, decide in the future. Chase, you're right. We actually have two master plans for our watershed property. One is kind of a recreation oriented one, and the other one is kind of a management from you know, kind of an ecological perspective, best practices, and with respect to stormwater erosion, forest health, wildfire protection, all of those sorts of things. And it's a big undertaking to, you know, kind of add that in here. And part of why I wrote that the way I did was I didn't want us to get too sidetracked and focus a lot of our efforts up there when we have a lot of things that we need to focus on in town as well. But we can continue, you know, this discussion.
And I thought that was really interesting how you said, you know, maybe we can capitalize on the resource to provide funding for some of our other missions here. I also think there's things we can do within policies in the city, like when there's a violation for construction, things like that, that we can figure out a sustainable source of funding for our urban forestry program too. And once those things are stable and under control, then maybe our scope widens to like some of the things you're talking about, because I think that would be great too.
I know funds that are generated from timber harvest are going to a pot that's designated to buy more property in the watershed, is my understanding. So getting money from that might not be able to be, you know, put in the city, but like, do you think there's opportunities for that where there's like violations of?
You know, I don't have in-depth knowledge of how often this is happening. You could probably speak to this a lot more, but I think what's important is for us to figure out how to make, it's great to get grants, but make this as self-sustaining as we can, while also getting people to comply, because it's beneficial to comply for everybody. You know, it's beneficial as the construction agent to comply. It's beneficial to the person who will buy the house to see, oh, this is going to be beautiful. It's going to increase my property values. There's just so many pieces where I think that's our job, is to make it easy and beneficial to all the people in the chain involved. I think there's a lot of opportunities that are probably either disorganized or untapped where we could be really beneficial.
Yeah, and Paige, to your point, just it kind of goes back to the, you know, public awareness and education that I was talking about earlier. Really simple things, you know, with respect to pruning a tree in the public right of way throughout town. A lot of folks don't know that they have to get a permit to do that. And that isn't necessarily a problem. You know, a lot of times it happens and, you know, they're setting up to prune a tree or plant a tree or remove a tree. And their neighbor or somebody comes by and is like, hey, did you get a permit from the city? And they're like, I didn't know that I needed a permit from the city. And I get calls periodically of like, hey, I just cut down a tree and then my neighbor told me it was in the public right of way. And, you know, that sort of thing happens. And that's part of the, you know, awareness that I want to get out. And typically, you know, so if that happens and somebody gives me a call and is like, hey, I made a mistake, I'm like, all right, you called, we're not gonna, you know, levy a fine against you or something like that. I'll come out and we'll talk through what, you know, what you were trying to work on or what you were trying to accomplish, and we'll figure out how we can, you know, move forward from there. Contrarily, there has been a couple situations throughout town this summer where, in one case, a rather large tree was removed. They submitted a permit request. The permit request was denied, because this was a part of a kind of a redevelopment of a house that, was demolished and being rebuilt. The permit was denied because they hadn't applied for or been reviewed or approved for a building permit. And that's kind of step one in the process. You're not gonna get a tree permit for me until in that context, until you have, you know, a building permit in place, that it's kind of a process. The permit itself for me is relatively simple. But there are steps that people have to follow, and this landowner chose not to follow those steps and cut down a tree illegally, and we're going through the process of levying a fine against that property owner right now. I can't provide any more information. It's going through the legal process currently. But that sort of thing happens. And that was a case where they clearly knew, we had a tree permit, that Sandpoint maintained a tree permit and what the policy was, and then they ignored it. Other situations, like I was describing earlier, it's like, hey, I made a mistake. We're not, you know, fining people for that. It's not my intention to, you know, generate money via fines. It's my intention to, you know, be a steward of what we have going on throughout town with respect to our, so that's kind of one of those areas where, you know, most of the forestry stuff I work on is really fun. I get really excited when I work on that. I don't get excited when I get a call from somebody that says, hey, we've got a crew somewhere in town that has no traffic control, and they're cutting a tree with, you know, guys standing on a ladder instead of a lift, and, you know, the typical stuff we've all seen. What else?
I have a quick question. So trees that are in the right of way, is that the homeowner's responsibility to maintain, or is that something that the city?
Trees that are in the right of way, technically they are owned by the city. It is the adjacent landowner's responsibility to maintain.
Okay. So to your question, it might benefit the city to not make it too onerous for pruning and upkeep. Now, cutting down a healthy tree is a totally different subject, in my opinion, but because it is a financial burden for the homeowner, making it easy for that property owner to keep that tree healthy, I think would be in the city's best interest.
Absolutely, and I completely agree. And, you know, on the surface, if you're just, you know, if you're a property owner and you say, I need a permit to prune my tree, that's wild. I don't necessarily disagree. But part of the reason that is in place currently is because of the lack of, you know, educational awareness about that sort of thing. I have no problem with folks pruning trees. I encourage that, and I want people to maintain their trees, but I want people to do it with some sort of background on how to do it properly.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, that's where that kind of permit and review comes in. And you know, I could give you a list of folks that I've spent 2, 3, 4 hours at their places throughout the year, either at one meeting or multiple meetings of how do I do this, or I've got this problem, or I want to prune this, or I want to plant here, or whatever. And I want to be a resource to those folks, and I hope I am a resource to those folks. I'll spend as much time as you know, a homeowner or property owner requests, trying to make sure they're doing the right things, selecting the right tree for the right place, planting it properly, how they, you know, care for it in future years, all of those sorts of things. So it is by no means is the permit intended to be like you have to get city approval? I mean, kind of, but it's not intended to be like a forceful thing. It's intended to be, you know, do you need assistance? Do you know how to prune a tree? If you do, great, go to town. If you don't, I'll help you figure out how to do that. And if we can ultimately, get our, residents and stakeholders kind of up to speed where we're all feeling comfortable with that, we could look at removing that requirement in the future. For right now, I would really hesitate to do that. Because one person with a saw can cause a lot of damage if they don't know what they're doing. And it's a safety concern. We don't want somebody to get hurt maintaining their tree, and we don't want them to hurt someone else if they're, pruning a tree and there's folks walking by on the sidewalk or something like that.
The lawyer in me is already blurring the lines between pruning and cutting. So, cut the top half of the tree off.
Yeah, and to be clear, I wasn't advocating that we get rid of that.
Sure. Yeah, and I totally agree that, on the surface, it sounds onerous. You're like, it's a tree. Come on, give me a break. I mean, I'm realistic in that, it's a tree, but the problem from my perspective is it's a tree one time. When you get dozens of those throughout the year and extrapolate that over a decade or two or three, when you've got, kind of, backdoor tree maintenance going on, it can, in the long term, result in significant canopy loss or significant damage to our resources.
And I can attest to the damage that I see on the ground every day, people with good intentions. Sometimes even tree companies, we come in after the fact, the damage is done. There's very, very little you can do at that point. There's rehabilitative pruning. Sometimes we can make things better, but once a tree is pruned in a harmful way, often then it becomes a hazard.
Right.
People are really good at topping trees, and that tree is going to become a hazard because the part where that grows back is weaker wooded than it ever was before. Somebody with a good intention thinks, oh, I'll shorten this, it'll be safer. Well, maybe it is maybe safer for a year, and then in the 10 years coming later, it's a hazard that now completely has to be cut down and started over. So I wonder if the system that we have now, where this kind of a big question, the tree is owned by the city in the right of way, but the homeowner's expected to take care of those expenses. And people don't understand trees are living assets that you can't just take a saw to and do whatever you want and it will be okay. So is there a flaw in the way that system is right now? Should we maybe look at some other urban forestry programs that are really successful and see if there are other models that we could think about down the road? This would be kind of a big project, but that's what we're doing here, right? Is thinking 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. Maybe we should look at other programs, because it's a little bit flawed to expect somebody with no experience to do a good job pruning a tree. Pruning is an it takes years of experience to know how to do it correctly. I don't know, I'll just throw that question out there.
I completely agree. And I don't see, to your point, Paige, I don't see a need for us to reinvent the wheel of, wipe the slate clean. Here's how we're doing, here's how our code's written. Here's what we're doing. We're just reinvented all of ourselves. There's a lot of cities that have really robust tree ordinances. And it would only be to our benefit that we spend some time looking around at different cities, places you've been, that have kind of stood out to you, like, man, they've kind of got their, ducks in a row with how they maintain stuff here, or places that you're like, whoa, they're out of control. Or, everything in the middle. There's lots of resources out there that we could poke through city codes and ordinances and how other places do it and kind of take lessons learned. And I'm happy to reach out to those folks too. I like calling and saying, hey, can I talk to your forester? And when people call me, in that context, I'm happy to talk to them. Here's what we're doing. Here's what works. Here's what doesn't work. What are you guys doing? What have you seen? What are your challenges? You only get benefit from doing that sort of thing. And to another point Paige made, we've got a handful of licensed arborists in town that maintain tree companies that do great work. We have a handful of tree services in town that, don't have licensed arborists that do good work. And we've got some both licensed and unlicensed companies that do questionable. And part of that educational and awareness is reaching out to those companies. And, there's a handful of new companies in town that are, you know, kind of doing renegade tree pruning or removals, and they either don't know or aren't reaching out to me to, you know, get permits when that sort of thing happens. And I'm trying to get them, you know, under control, but, you know, sometimes they're new companies and it takes a while for me to find out that there's a new company operating in town. So if you guys see that, please let me know. Take photos, email them to me, whatever. If you see a, you know, new truck with a sign on the side that you haven't seen before and it looks like something, even if it's not something bad, even if they're doing good work, send me a photo of it, because I may not know that company is around and I'd like to, you know, reach out to them and say, hey, I'm here, I'm a resource. Give me a call when you need something.
For education and outreach is gonna be a significant component. I mean, and really being precise with the messaging, you know, there can be negative connotation when the word permit is tossed out there, and just, I mean, really driving home, you know, the fact that this is meant to be client's assistance, if you will, like we want to help you do the job correctly. That's all this permit
That's all.
is about,
Exactly.
making sure that messaging is clear.
Absolutely.
And I like Paige's line of thinking on, you know, trying to finagle some way to maybe be solvent. I mean, depending on how, it seems like there's vision for Sandpoint's urban forest program to be pretty robust, a pretty large budget. The council is, they've got a difficult task with managing requests from every city department and every, you know, from hand to the other. And it could be working with legal. I know there's, you know, municipal statutory requirements on what pots of money can be used where. But if there's a way to figure out some kind of solvency or work towards it, I think that would be a good thing for the city.
It sounds to me like the awareness of the right of way, street pruning, and maybe not completely well understood by you know, the homeowners. And, but yeah, it's very important. So I think some sort of, you know, outreach, some educational efforts. Like I just learned, because we live on a cul-de-sac, you can't park on a cul-de-sac. So, you know, emergency vehicle, and people park on cul-de-sacs all the time, but there was a flyer that went around and said, you know, you have to park.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of people just aren't aware that this is a city tree. They, you know, they need to consult with the city. It's scary.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I meant to kind of get into this earlier, but just real quickly, I think two of our members are not Sandpoint residents. Preston, you're not a Sandpoint resident.
No, I live on Birch Street.
You are a Sandpoint resident. Jeff, you are not, correct? Are the other four of you, three of you Sandpoint residents? Yeah, okay, I thought so. Our ordinance in this, with respect to this, was a little bit unique. On these citizen committees and commissions you know, we always want to have Sandpoint residents be members. With this one, we relax the requirements a little bit because there's only so many tree folks in Sandpoint. You know, we're a town of less than 10,000 people, and I'm thrilled we got this group together for this commission. But just kind of FYI, that is a little bit unique compared to our other committees and commissions. We did kind of relax the requirements a little bit so we could, you know, have qualified folks on this commission.
I'd back up what's been said about, budget and knowing how much tree pruning and tree removal and, you know, taking care of trees after they're a problem. It's a ton of money. And I don't think the city would want to see that budget added in to take care of all the issues with all the right of way trees or the homeowners as well. So I think, knowing a little bit about the city budget, a lot of the budget goes to just a couple things or a couple departments more than the others. And stuff like Parks and Rec is pretty much self-funded. And so we're probably gonna have a hard time pulling money out of the, you know, out of the residents' pockets essentially and I think if we're like charging for permits, like a high amount or anything like that, then yeah, we're gonna have a problem keeping ourselves, in good shape as far as the public sees us. But on the other hand, tree health is a pretty big deal that if we look at, maybe like since like 2003, how much has the city been city's probably just been doing enough to like maintain, a certain level, which I would personally like to see that to be more, which is gonna cost money at some point. So, are we gonna be able to expect $100,000 grant every year, or probably not, at least from one source. But, I think getting the word out to people, as far as what they can and should be doing with the trees in their front yard or backyard, we could spend a lot of money on that alone, and that would probably go a long ways. Also, I think, climate stuff and shade and, tree health, I mean, it's probably a bigger deal than what most people see it as. And it's a pretty good way for the city to look pretty good too. So, I mean, there's really no downside to it, in my opinion. So I feel like if we can push a little bit, it's probably worth doing. So,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
kind of another thing that, I thought of as you guys were talking a minute ago is, with respect to, kind of the burden on homeowners or property owners for maintaining right-of-way trees. I've had a number of situations this summer and fall with respect to, I've received a tree permit request, or we found out somebody was pruning a tree in the right-of-way without a permit, what have you. That, that is absolutely an economic burden on private property owners. If you have to, if you have a 30-inch diameter tree that has died or is on its way out and it needs to be removed, that can cost thousands of dollars to remove. And some folks can afford that and it's no big deal. And a lot of other folks can't afford it. They can barely keep their refrigerator stocked, and now the city's telling them they have to remove a tree at the tune of $5,000 or something to that effect. And I'm not sure if other cities or municipalities have a structure for it, but I think it would be great if we could develop some sort of program for like lower income folks, where that burden does not fall on them. I'm not sure how you accomplish that. That's a legal thing. And what is possible or is not possible. I don't know if state law allows that. Zach may know off the top of his head. I'm not sure he's super into tree law. That's kind of something that I've noticed, and it makes me feel terrible. If you've got somebody that's, elderly or lower income or whatever that, doesn't have the ability or the funds to, put into maintaining a right-of-way tree or planting a tree or whatever. It kind of makes me a little bit sad, to be honest. I don't want to, it's hard to put that burden on somebody when they're having a hard time putting food on the table or something like that, or paying their bills. So that's another thing I've kind of noticed, and it's just like, I wonder if there's a structure somewhere where we could, kind of help folks out in that context.
And could maybe start with looking internally. I mean, I know that there's been, there's the sidewalk maintenance issue that the city's grappled with for years. And I know there's been, it seems like improvements in that regard. I haven't looked at it closely, but it seems like there have been improvements to where it alleviates some of the burden. And maybe the framework is here internally to maybe piggyback into into that when it comes to hazard tree removal. Just spitballing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm open if anybody's aware of something like that, or, has a different structure or something that might help. Let's discuss it. We don't have to discuss it right this second, but let's talk about it in future meetings if appropriate and see if we can figure out how to, accomplish that.
I see it.
Go ahead.
It's okay, go ahead.
When a property sells, there's nothing in a city requirement to do an inspection on the trees right now that I know of. Is there?
Not that I'm aware of.
So like when you buy a house now, you gotta have a sewer line, and then I think sidewalk is in there too, where it used to be. If there's no sidewalk, you have to build one. Also, if there's a building permit pulled for a certain dollar amount, then there's inspections. So I guess we're not doing anything with it. It could be piggybacked on there pretty easy. And if it's at a time when somebody's spending a chunk of money anyway, you know, a tree inspection wouldn't be, I mean, usually they're gonna be free. So that could be a time to kind of help. That would also be an awareness thing too, because I know the sewer thing has been, I mean, I think everybody knows that now. Way more people than, you know, when there was problems with it, nobody knew and everybody just dealt with the problems. And now it seems like there's definitely more knowledge of the community.
Yeah, I can speak to, there are maybe some inconsistencies in, that opportunity you're talking about, like, oh, you've just built a house or bought a house and now there should be an inspection. Well, we are building a house right now and, to get our certificate of occupancy, we had to plant a tree. We were told over the phone. Then when the actual inspection occurred, nobody looked at the tree. So there's just some things there that I think you're saying is a really good opportunity to be sure these things are happening, and it just needs a little bit more follow through, or, you know, written down how exactly this is gonna be carried out.
Yeah, and sorry, Paige, go ahead.
Oh, and the other thing I was gonna say is that I think, you know, we have kind of, without going into too much detail, but in future meetings, we have two things going on here. We have all of, these big issues. How do we solve these issues? That we have big trees that need work, we have hazard trees that need cut down, we have residents with no money to do it. Like, these are all really important problems to be figuring out solutions to. And then there's the other side of it where we can proactively prevent all these problems from happening 10, 20, 30 years down the road. So how much of our time do we spend solving, tackling those issues, spending a whole bunch of budget money? And how much of it do we spend planning a new program where right tree for the right place, make sure it's planted correctly? You know, that's so much of what goes into a tree 10 years from now is, was it planted correctly? Is it the correct species for the amount of exposure it has, or the wind, or the salt from the sidewalk, or people walking by, all these things, that, you know, we can set ourselves up for, we can set the city up for success in the long term. So it's kind of like the split issue of, like, here's all of this, and then here's all of this that we can spend our time, and how do we allocate that time?
Absolutely, and we can absolutely get, you know, not sidetracked, but we can totally go off on a path and focus on that, and in a lot of cases, that is absolutely, you know, necessary. But as we've all been discussing for the last hour, we've got a lot of things to, you know, wrap our heads around, a lot of things we wanna, you know, try to accomplish, or structures we wanna put in place. Paige, with respect to, you know, your comment about, you know, nobody came by and inspected the tree, or nobody looked at it. That's part of what I'm trying to kind of get under control. So currently our tree permit, is separated from our building permit and kind of plans review process. And that's okay, except in situations like that. Most of the time, when folks are submitting for a building permit, or, you know, kind of through planning and zoning, that whole process for a subdivision or something similar. I'm typically wrapped in when those come in, and, I review, you know, development plans, or, a site plan for a house coming in, and it doesn't comply with our code, yes or no. But sometimes things fall through the cracks, and, it sounds like your case is one that fell through the cracks, and I'm not sure when you requested that inspection, but it could have been kind of, you know, in the changeover of when I was taking over these duties from Maeve. Or maybe it was just missed, but, that kind of goes back to, I would like to ultimately have our tree permit wrapped into this building permit and kind of plans review process. Which would make it a requirement that, those boxes are checked before, you know, you get a certificate of occupancy if you're building a new house. We can absolutely do that, and we've been talking about that internally in the city for a little while now. part of that, wrapping that into our building permit and plans review process can absolutely be done. The question is, do we want to charge for those permits? For building permits and, you know, other permits the city has, there is a fee. We do not have to charge a fee for these permits. We could. And that, you know, that's a decision and conversation we can have, you know, at these meetings. What I could see benefits to both ways, you know, having a small fee for a permit could be beneficial. Contrarily, not having a permit could, you know, promote compliance. If folks know they've got to pay a fee, they're maybe more likely to, you know, not get a permit and just do it. If the permit's free, but it's wrapped into, you know, an overall process, that can encourage more compliance without putting, you know, a burden on private property. So,
Also, a thing to think about would be even further, are there incentives that could be given to homeowners, you know, beyond just, well, there's no fee. It doesn't really help us with the education push, like, here's this thing you need to know about it, comply with. Is there some kind of tax break, or I don't know?
yeah,
Just
and
throwing
those
things
are
out
all
there.
things we can consider. And if anybody knows of a structure, you know, or you've seen one, or you know, research and you find one, bring it to this room and this group, and let's talk about it and see what's possible.
And I think
When
that
you
was,
come up with these ideas, make sure to tell staff ahead of time so they can keep it on the agenda.
that was gonna be my next question. What's the process for getting something on the agenda, just so everybody knows? Just email Eric? Yep. So if you have something you want to talk about at the next meeting, just give Eric an email.
And I suspect we're gonna be leaning on staff, at least initially, for developing formulating agenda items.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly with the action items, we have something that needs to be voted on, but if there's just a discussion topic, I think.
Yeah, and that picture will get clearer, you know, as we have a few meetings and everybody kind of, you know, gets their head wrapped around the process and what we're doing here. But in the short term, absolutely send everything to me. And I'm familiar enough with kind of the public meetings law process to, you know, does this need to be an item on new business, on old business? Is this just a discussion point? We can categorize those where appropriate in the short term. We're getting towards 11:30, and I don't want to hold everyone up here, but I did want to ask, does everybody know how to find or have a copy of our master plan and our arboriculture manual?
Eric, if I can interrupt 1 second, I'm got an email message ready to go for all of you that's going to include that link. As well as a link to chapter 15 under title 7 that you'd mentioned for our urban forestry city code. And Eric's contact information, Samantha's contact information. You'll have information to contact Kyle as well. So just,
Perfect.
I'll send a message out to everybody.
She was ahead of me. Melissa, is it appropriate or necessary to publish a contact list for all of us internally with our members' contacts? Obviously, we've got, you know, we need to be cautious about not having a quorum. But is that appropriate? Should we plan to do that if, you know, if folks are going to create a tree commission specific email or phone number and the like?
What we've been really encouraging everyone to do is if a commission member has a question or wants to suggest something or get some information out to the rest of the commission, to simply send that through you, and then that can go through you, through Sam.
Okay.
And then they don't have to worry about trying to concern themselves with whether or not they're creating a meeting, an email or anything like that. All that can just flow through also that gives you an opportunity to see what correspondence is going out to the commission. And anything you may want to remark on that or.
And like I mentioned earlier, if you guys are around town, you know, either working at your day job or you just notice something that doesn't look right, let me know. That could be a company doing something they shouldn't be doing. That could be a tree that, you know, looks like it is a hazard. It could be any of those items. Let me know. I want to know about it. I don't necessarily always have the fundings or resources to respond immediately, but I will inspect and, you know, figure out what needs to happen. I hope you guys can be and want to be kind of eyes and ears. I spend I've got kind of blocks in my schedule where I spend time walking, driving throughout town, just looking at trees. I'm glad I'm not the only one that walks around town doing this. I know you guys all do that too. And you know, I'm sure I get weird looks, somebody standing in their living room looking out like, what's that guy doing standing up there? But let me know if you see that stuff. I want to know. You know, I try and stay on top of all of that, but I can't be everywhere all the time. And, you know, there's a lot more, you know, you guys have a lot of knowledge and input and, you know, the eyes and ears to know when something doesn't look right or something's a potential concern. So please let me know. Anyone else have anything they want to talk about? Should we kind of wrap up the first meeting?
I
Good
just have one
question.
question about Tree City status, and what that entails and what sort of reporting. Do we have, is there something you have to keep up with when you have a Tree City?
Yeah,
designation?
there is,
Is there anything that can be leveraged from that?
not that I know of, but maybe, that's kind of something I've been meaning to look into a little bit. We are Tree City USA. We, are required to have a Tree City or Arbor Day event every year where we dedicate it, we plant a tree and dedicate it as, you know, the tree associated with Tree City USA. We kind of missed our Arbor Day event this summer. We had, you know, some opportunities and I think we have a tree dedicated, but we didn't have a formal event. And that was kind of due to the changeover of me taking on these duties and, you know, just lack of time. But I would love to engage more with, you know, kind of the Arbor Day Foundation and Tree City USA and really highlight that. I think it's a really awesome thing. And, you know, I think folks get really excited about that too. So I hope that, you know, next summer we can, where appropriate, maybe July 4th or something like that, one of those kind of big events where there's a lot of people in town have an event and, you know, do some, you know, maybe pruning or maintenance, kind of demonstrations or, something like that where we can just, you know, we're here to help. We're not here to say this is what you can or can't do. I mean, sometimes yes, but, you know, we want to help and we're trying to, you know, make, you know, changes and improvements to how we manage and maintain our urban forest. Okay, with no further business on the agenda, this meeting is now adjourned at 11:31 a.m.